Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Words on Whiskey, episode 19, brought to you by Irish Whiskey Magazine. So, as usual, you're all very welcome, and we have a double header today, very unusual, and we'll start talking to these gentlemen in a while. Firstly, I just want to introduce the news as usual, and let's kick off with the breaking news for this week. So, the big news is yesterday, Teeling Whiskey released Black Pits, a peated single malt Irish whiskey. It's their second release from their own spirit, and it's a 46% ABV, single malt, non-chill filtered, and available for €60. So, this is a fantastic release. It's possibly a game changer and bringing peated whiskey into the mainstream. It just shows the versatility of Irish malt. So, wish them every success with that. Other news then from the Irish drinks industry, bad news really, in terms of job losses due to the COVID epidemic that is currently engaging the world really, but upwards of 30,000 job losses predicted if the situation doesn't improve. So our thoughts are with all those people who have lost their job and are suffering under these conditions. And then finally, from the Irish Whiskey Association, they gained legal status for Irish whiskey in Belarus there last week. And that brings up 85% of Irish whiskey is now protected worldwide. So I see that Russia and some of the other countries in North Africa still have to be given the same legal protection. But there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes there in protecting Irish whiskey, and it's vitally important that they do protect the reputation. And I think Carleen and her team there in the Irish Whiskey Association are doing a great job on representing us and giving us that status to protect Irish whiskey. So that's the news. So without further ado, I'm going to add in two gentlemen here from Tullamore DEW. So we have Batman, or Kevin Piggot, and John Quinn. Both very welcome.
Seriously, that should be the other way around. That should be.
Get out of it.
So I suppose we have the elder statesman and the young gun. Although saying that, Kevin, you've been at this since 2012 with Tullamore.
Yep, John reluctantly hired me with questionable HR practice, but I got through the net. Yeah,
you slipped through the net. So, yeah. And John, you've been in the business.
Escaping the net.
Yeah. Well, one thing that's quite evident is that you're not both in the same location, which is great for COVID distancing. So, you're both very welcome. It's the first time we've had two ambassadors on the show. John, you've been in the business since '74, and your current role is global brand ambassador for Tullamore DEW.
That's right.
And is that obviously it's a role within Grant's, William Grant's. Does it cover the other brands as well, or is it covering just Tullamore DEW?
No, my God, no. They have enough trouble with me covering Tullamore DEW, Sarah. They would not allow me near any other brand. To be fair, I wouldn't be able to be an ambassador for any other brand. I'm clueless about other brands. And I suppose I make a science of that. Yeah. Spend an awful lot of my time and my life worrying about this one. I would struggle to be able to. The other whiskey brands within the William Grant's group are Scotch whiskey brands. It would be very odd for me to be an ambassador for a Scotch whiskey brand.
Yeah. Well, you started in the industry in 1974, from what I've researched.
Yeah, I was two.
You started young, all right.
Yeah.
You haven't aged so well if you started at 2.
Jeez, thanks. I was searching for a compliment there. Didn't work. Yeah.
That backfired. Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. Long time ago.
How did you get started, John?
Oh, it's a very, very interesting HR story. That's a classic HR recruitment of a Gaelic footballer in a club in Dublin whose manager had a brother who was the personnel manager in a company called Irish Distillers, and they were looking for a young fella to come and start at the bottom and sweep post room or something like that. And so anyway, that was all July 74. The man came to me sometime in May and said, when you're finished your leaving cert, would you be interested in working for a company? I thought, a company, Irish Sisters, it sounds like a company with a lot of broken bottles coming off trucks and things. Didn't really know anything about it at that stage. Yeah, and then so I started there. I got a promotion before I started, which was really weird, because I was supposed to be the post boy in the office, and then rang me up and said, we've promoted you. You're now going to work at our bottling plant in Fox and Geese. And so I got a big promotion, a big salary increase before I started. Okay, the last bit not really true. But so anyway, and I started working at the bottling plant in Fox and Geese. And then I moved, from that I moved into different roles in the distillery area in John's Lane for a couple of years. Then I moved into sales and marketing and eventually into the international side of the business. I mean, it wasn't that quick. It took 7 years for it to get from the 8 years to get into the international side of the business, but there was a lot of roles in between,
Yeah, and obviously you were with Powers for a while then in John's Lane, were you?
So the way it worked, Serge, was Irish Distillers was formed in 1972 in that the Bushmills came into the portfolio at that stage. So it had been sort of without Bushmills until 1972, and then 1974, which is 2 years later. And everybody who worked in Irish Distillers at that stage worked for every brand. They didn't work for one particular brand or another. But I did move into the marketing department and working in a brand management role for Powers at that stage. So in that sense, I was working for Powers. And then, depending on what area of the business you were in, you were focusing on maybe one brand over another.
Right.
But for a time I was at Powers. But at that stage, I was based at the distillery building in John's Lane. The distillery was still working at that stage. In 75, 76, the distillery was working. It was an exciting time to be there. It was also a time when the distillery was closing. It was there, 76, 77, 78. We moved into the new building in Smithfield in 79, I think. So all during that time, we went from being a working distillery in John's Lane to being a closed distillery in John's Lane with sort of still all of the elements of the distillery, including the laboratory, by the way, that was still there, but not distilling as such.
Yeah. What was it like in those times, John?
That was brilliant. It was a great place to work because there were loads of people like me started around my time. When the company formed, there was a lot of new people needed in different areas, and it was great. There was an awful lot of us who started around the same time. And actually, would you believe, there's a gang of ex-IDL, as we call ourselves, people who meet every November for a dinner in Dublin. And there's about 30-something of us. And we're all either retired or, I was going to say dead. Dead ones don't turn up, but retired or old. And it's just great back to catch up with them all. Actually, I think I might be the only one still in the business, in the whiskey business. Everybody else is retired and moved to something else. But it's great crack, and we relive old times, and it's fantastic.
Yeah. And when did you join Tullamore?
So, well, when I was working in Irish Distillers, one of the things that happened was that I was managing the business from the early 80s. I was managing the business in Australia and New Zealand and Africa and some of Asia and that. And Tullamore was the big brand in those markets at that time. That was the focus brand. So, like, when did you join Tullamore? I was with them from 74 because I was part of Irish Distillers. But in the early 80s, I started to focus on Tullamore, my own role as what we call export development manager. And then I moved to C&C Group, C&C International, and that time in the early 90s, C&C bought the Tullamore DEW brand from Irish Distillers. And I would say that was a signature time in the Irish whiskey business, because C&C at that time was part of a company called Allied Domecq. And Allied Domecq was the second biggest spirit company in the world after Diageo at that time. In fact, later Pernod Ricard bought Allied Domecq. Nobody remembers that except me, but later when Pernod Ricard bought Allied Domecq, they bought Pernod Ricard was the fifth biggest, and bought the second biggest company. That was a huge thing. But when Irish Distillers sold the brand, Pernod Ricard sold the brand 94 to C&C, which is part of a huge company called Allied Domecq. It was a big decision, because it meant that there was another powerhouse of a company going to promote an Irish whiskey brand, a significant Irish whiskey brand that had a global footprint. That was huge for the category.
So, I mean, Tullamore closed in 1954, and then Powers took the brand in 65. C&C then acquired the brand in the 90s, and it was 2010 then.
94. Yeah, 2010. William Grant bought the brand from C&C. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they paid a lot of money for that brand. It was a huge amount at that time, 171 million.
Yeah, huge money at the time. If you think about it, it was worth about 600,000 cases of business there, and a solid business base, particularly strong in Central Europe, particularly strong in Scandinavia, particularly strong in Germany, Austria. So there was a really good solid business base. I mean, already in Central Europe, Tully was probably the biggest whiskey brand across that region. So it was very significant. Not probably, it definitely was. I mean, it was a very significant business base to have in a developing region. So I mean, I honestly look back and I think maybe that was cheap in comparison to other purchases that happened. I mean, in 2005, Diageo bought Bushmills. It was a smaller brand than ours, and they paid an awful lot more money for it. But that's.
So one of our viewers is asking, why don't I have a glass in my hand, and why don't you? I think Kevin does.
That was Peter. I know that was Peter.
Peter, was it?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, definitely. Peter's
I've got the 18-year-old single malt in my hands, which I've done quite a good job on, considering I didn't open it that long ago. But
where's my bottle? Hold on a second. That's what I'm drinking. Peter Pulkert, I'm drinking it. XO, you'll be happy.
Yeah, and Kevin, I'm having a drink before I speak to you, Kevin, because
that's okay.
But
you need a drink to talk to me. That's okay.
Hopefully not.
You're not alone.
What are you having yourself?
I'm actually having some Phoenix.
Okay.
But the 46% one.
Oh, very good.
With the last little bit of that was available, so I made sure to take a few bottles and stash them under my bed.
Yeah.
Kevin, I mean, one thing that I can't get. There you go. I mean, how annoying is that?
I have the one that you signed, John, the Phoenix Cask Strength. They were.
Oh yeah.
That's Values whiskey, though. Just remember that, Sergius.
Oh well, actually the Tullamore range. They're very extensive in the width and breadth of what they cover, and perhaps people don't realize, because in Ireland, I don't know if it's the case or not, but certainly worldwide, Tullamore DEW is the second largest brand by quite a bit. So I think over 1 million cases were shifted last year. Is it?
I like Kevin Piggot answer that.
Yeah, well over. I mean, closer to the 1.5. So I think it was 1.48 million 9-liter cases. So. Yeah.
So I mean, you're number 2 worldwide. I think you overtook Bushmills in the US quite a while ago now, isn't it?
Yeah, if you look at the trajectory there, it's crazy. Such a big brand, and if you watch how their growth slowed, although in the last year or two is doing okay, but quite a few years ago now, really, and then obviously, both globally and in the US.
I mean, like, I think we passed Bushmills globally in 2006. I think it was around that, but to be fair, it's like such a fantastic whiskey, Bushmills, and probably when it was part of Diageo, it started being in a huge pool of different brands and didn't get the investment, I'd say.
Yes.
the guys who have it now are going to do a great job with it.
I think so. I mean, there's new developments happening there, and I see they released an older whiskey there recently as well for the US.
So it's a brilliant brand, brilliant distillery, great people now. Like it's wonderful whiskey, no question about it.
Yeah. Just to switch over to Kevin then, since I have a drink in my hand. Kevin, welcome.
Thank you very much.
You started in 2012. You were recruited as a brand ambassador. And maybe I should ask John, actually, what was it you saw in Kevin, John, that convinced you to take him on?
Not a lot, really. I mean, I'm struggling myself to remember now what, because he hasn't shown much in terms of talent or development skill. But look, we're carrying him, we're taking him along, and hopefully someday he'll prove that
he'll develop.
We pay him is somewhat worth it. I don't know. It's been difficult, all I'd say. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But we're kind of a charity case, you know.
You could rein in his salary.
It's been a tough 8 years as his personal assistant. Yeah, I've even shown John TikTok and everything. It's every day is a struggle.
Yeah. You get him through the technical parts.
Not easy.
Not easy, yeah. But well, I mean, your role now is changed since February, Kevin.
Yeah.
So, what is it? Culture Ambassador?
Global Culture and Distillery Ambassador. Yeah. Definitely, I guess bringing in some of the culture is a very broad word, but giving that, lending that word to the title to show that it's not just about whiskey, it's Irish culture that we bring with us when we run events and bring people to Ireland. It's not to the distillery and back to the airport. It could be 3-4 days in Ireland learning about our culture. So sort of taking a more holistic view on it.
Yeah, I mean, it is very much brand Ireland as well, isn't it? You know,
absolutely.
But you started in 2012, and did you go stateside initially?
Yep. So hired in late 2012, January 2012, I headed off to Philadelphia, and then moved on to New York. But we would have done some of our training stateside in New York. So I remember the famous Tim Hurley bringing us to this bar that was about to open. And he introduced us to Jack and Sean, who were about to open their bar next week. And they asked what we thought about it. And we said, it seems okay. It seems like a nice bar. Little did we know it was going to go on to be the legendary Dead Rabbit and all that went to follow that. So it just shows that as beautiful as a bar is, it's the people that make it special. You know, when we were in an empty bar, it didn't have that special thing that those two gentlemen brought with their wider team, who were all very high standard staff. I saw a question in the comments there. I don't know if my comment went through, but someone had asked about California with Tully. They should be able to get like whiskeys like XO and Total Wine stores across California, and maybe they can let me know if there was other variants they were looking for, and I can see if I can point them to stores or locations that if they're looking for the wider Tully range.
Yeah, obviously you're huge in the States, and I presume you have great distribution over there. So does that mean COVID may have had less an effect on Tullamore DEW than it would on new and emerging distilleries?
Do you want me or John to answer that?
Yeah, I mean...
Well, don't fight over it.
No, we're not going to fight. I think we wouldn't, for once, we probably would agree on this, but I think the challenge for everybody is the closure of the on-premise in so many places for so long. Now, in some places, especially in the US, it's open up again. But when the on-premise or the bars and the restaurants close, that's a lot of business lost. And that probably applies more to the bigger brands than some of the small brands, in the sense that the bigger brands are, well, let's say, better known and then are more often poured. On the other hand, the reverse is also probably true, that because we would be regarded as one of the bigger brands, we're probably widely distributed in the off-premise, the take-home trade. And so when people have an option to go to a bar and they want to drink at home, then they're going to pick the brands that they know best. So in some ways, it's a disadvantage for the big brands because we lose more, and in other ways, it's an advantage because we have an opportunity to pick it up in take-home trade. But for everybody, it's not good. And for the smaller brands, they maybe can now find routes to market through the getting into some of the off-trade business, and also through e-commerce and online buying, etc.
Yeah. Tell me, just going back to Kevin's role as brand ambassador, how was it different to the role you had, John, as brand ambassador in your earlier days?
Yeah. So if I was to be honest, he has some talent, and generally in the area of understanding modern drinking habits, for example, in mixology, in cocktails. He has great reach with the bartender community globally, with the influencer community globally, and that whole cultural development in terms of, let's say, influencers, whiskey people, mixology people, who are particularly people who communicate via social media. Kevin does that very well. It kills me to say that, but he does that very well. Maybe I'm old and more traditional, but I tend to focus on the whiskey credentials and the traditions and the traditional attraction of whiskey. And I think there's a role for both of us in terms of who we can. If whiskey people are interested in whiskey, that they might talk to me, and if people are interested in what whiskey does culturally and does in terms of mixology, etc., Kevin is a great man to talk to there.
Yeah, I mean, how did you enjoy it, Kevin? How did you enjoy the role? Was it as glamorous and as appealing as it all sounds?
It's a dangerous job in a sense to give to a 22-year-old in a new country. There's definitely, it's not for everyone. But I think I learned a lot about myself personally, and I probably would have been a lot more shy and introverted before it and come out a lot more extroverted. So it definitely forced me to push comfort zones, public speaking, improve all those aspects of sort of socializing that I probably was quite nervous of coming out of college and things like that. I think I would have been a bit more studious and living in books, and maybe not as used or accustomed to this whiskey lifestyle, which can be late nights and early flights. And
what did you study in college?
I did a BCom in Galway, so commerce, focus on sort of economics and accounting, and then I did a master's in Smurfit and international business. I would have did about 9 months in an accounting firm. I probably would have thought that, or I would have loved to work in economics and maybe the central bank. But sometimes life gives you better ideas, so you just go with it. So.
Yeah, I find it hard to picture you now as an accountant. I don't know. Yeah, things change. And how are the technology and social media lessons going with John? Any improvement?
Kevin, you need to lie. You need to lie now, okay? Time to lie.
My dad is the same age as John, and he hasn't a clue what Instagram is. So when you put it in that realm, I think it's fair to say he's leaps and bounds, beyond that. So.
Yeah, well, I was delighted he was able to read the email and get the link to the show. So you've obviously done a great job. So, but
Piggott's now getting credit for having any skills. Break.
It's his background team. He's got, as you know, 20 kids and God knows how many grandkids. They're all helping him.
I think Sheila's the wife, is it, John?
I have 6. Hold on. God does know how many grandchildren I have. I have 6, and don't be saying God knows as if I had more than 6. But like none of my children help me with the. Well, that's not quite true. But very few of them help me with my social media. So, that would suggest that I have some skills in that area, but not many. But I am embracing it.
Yeah,
as much as
taking up the challenge. Yeah.
That's it.
So I think one of the things that I read, you'd done a previous interview with somebody, and you're saying one of your proudest achievements, John, was the fact that you've seen over 30 brand ambassadors into the group.
Yeah.
What is it you look for in an ambassador? What qualities, for somebody that wants to become a brand ambassador, what are the qualities they need, and what is it you look for?
It's a really great question, Sergeant. I'll tell you the answer is easy, but I'll tell you, I hate what I'm going to say now. What I'm going to say, we look for the X factor. Now, such a pain in the arse to say that, but the truth of the matter is that when we're looking for somebody to represent Tully in, particularly somewhere in the US, you have to have somebody who people will remember, but in a good way. You know what I mean? Like, in other words, you can't have somebody who's in some way vanilla. Like Kevin said, he was going to be an accountant. If we had picked that up from Kevin in his interview, it might have been a challenge to see somebody who was going to stand out in I mean in the poetic way of being colourful, somebody who will make an impact immediately, people remember and will want to see coming back into the bar. That's what you're always looking for. But on top of that, he or she has to be a great communicator, has to be able to get messages across in a succinct and entertaining way, and again in a way that you will remember what they said. It's not easy to find people at 22 or 23 years of age who can do that. In fact, they're few and far between. And we've been blessed. We've found more than 30 of them. They've been to different parts of the world for us. And so many of them now work for us in either Tullamore DEW or William Grant's, you know. So we're very lucky. I mean, Kevin slipped through that, but, you know, we're hanging on there. Yeah.
He's managed to pull the wool over people's eyes until now.
He did. Continues to do it every day.
Definitely.
I think he's a fantastic brand ambassador for you, and you know, and there's been some previous great ambassadors as well. I suppose Matt Healy and Tim Hurley who come to mind as well.
Absolutely, I mean, and the other thing is that, you know, those are people like Matt and Tim who are still in the industry. Still will make an impact. Will continue to make an impact. Even if there are competitors, they're just been people from the industry. And you know, as part of the Irish Whiskey Association, I can look at people like that and think they are good for Irish whiskey wherever they go. So, you know, that's important too.
Keep an eye out for whatever Tim brings out soon. Definitely pick up a bottle, because whatever Tim gets behind will definitely be some interesting liquid. Yes,
I had a meeting with Tim in the Palace Bar not so long ago, and he's a fountain of knowledge, and he's definitely on the ball. But I wanted to just touch on the difficult fact. I suppose we're talking about COVID and the difficulties that's brought on. Obviously, some of the bad news over the last couple of weeks was the closure of the visitor centre in the old bonded warehouse with the loss of, I think, 14 jobs. Was that brought about by COVID or accelerated by COVID, or was it part of the longer term play to shift that visitor centre and bring it closer to the distillery?
Okay, and the first thing to say about Kevin, it's okay if I take this one. The first thing to say about this, Sergis, is that there are 14 people from our visitor centre in Tullamore who are going through the process of you know, speaking with the company about the closure of the visitor centre. So it's a tough, very, very tough time for some of our colleagues, and we have to show a great feeling and empathy for them, and
absolutely,
hats off to them for all the work they did down the years. Great work. In truth, the plan always was, from the earliest designs of the distillery back in 2012 to 2013, there was always built into a phase in the future to have the visitor facility at the distillery, in fact. But we had converted the visitor centre, the old bonded warehouse, into a magnificent visitor centre in 2012. So it was very difficult to move away from that, because it was such an iconic building with such an iconic team and message that to get across to visitors. And so the idea now is that we would bring to life the idea of having our visitor centre at the distillery. I mean, we're one of the few, if you like, distilleries that doesn't have a visitor centre on site. And as much as we have a magnificent setup in Bury Quay in by the canal with our visitor centre there, it was a shortcoming in our total package, as it were, not to have access to the actual distillery itself. Certainly the pandemic and COVID and the difficulties that all brought forward the thinking and said, look, we now need to start planning for the future, whereby we will have a great visitor facility, a great visitor experience at the distillery in Tullamore. And that's where we got to the point where we say, okay, we can't have two visitor facilities running. We now need to start planning to have the new facility open for the tourist season if it happens next June. And that's where the decision was brought at.
Yeah, I mean, from a visitor point of view, it is an awful shame. It was a fantastic experience, and I think there was very much a certain warmth. Everybody got one going there. You know, the staff were so friendly. It was a very intimate kind of visitor centre. So obviously, sympathies going to those.
And you know, colleagues of ours, Kevin and I, are very close to all of them, and it's for them it's a really tough time. At the same time, in the future, we will have a different visitor facility actually at the distillery, and hopefully we will build up the same kind of rapport with people through our team there, and hopefully there will be roles for some of them to move over to the new facility in time as well.
Yeah, hopefully so. Hopefully so. This is just some images here of the visitor centre. And I've had many a fantastic tour, a few with the Aviators Society, and but I mean, onto the new, and I suppose this distillery, it's it's absolutely magnificent building. 2014, 17th of September was the official opening date.
Correct.
That's right.
Yeah, and I mean, this is a distillery like no other in the sense that this is built to last. This is not a short-term play. This is a huge investment, huge planning. I think it's 100 staff you have working there, is it?
Yep.
KP?
Yep, around that.
Yeah. What's the capacity there at the moment, Kevin, now in terms of production?
About 12 MLA overall.
Wow, that's between grain. So there's grain, there's pot still, and there's malt whiskey being produced.
Correct. So the single malt and pot still is being made in the building that you're seeing in this picture. This is the malt and pot plant, and then the other facility is where we make our single grain.
Yeah. So here you see the fermentation and the mashes and the pot stills, and so you're very much self-sufficient site. So you have maturation, bottling, and distillation all on site.
And the cooperage.
And the cooperage as well as the new addition now.
There's the column.
And these are the grain stills, the column stills. What amazed me about the column stills is how quickly everything went up. I mean, within the space of a year, this was operational.
Yeah.
Is that based on the experience that was gained from Grant's having distilleries in Scotland?
Absolutely. So Girvan is the prime example that this would have been modelled and inspired off. And part of the reason we used wheat, we had that understanding from Scotland. It's what we've used in Girvan. So we have great expertise in this area, one of the biggest grain distilleries in Scotland. And then also wheat, just as a grain, being able to, you know, have an ability to source it from Ireland. So you didn't actually have to, like, you're never going to get corn from Ireland, really.
Yeah. So I mean, that would be one of the big differentiating factors then, is that you guys use wheat, and mostly Irish wheat, I presume, for
where possible. Distilling. Absolutely. Yeah. So it is a bit harder to process than malt, but I guess your grain specs are different. If you're malt, you're looking for 4.5% moisture content. You're looking for maybe 14, 15 in the wheat. So there are differences, but I guess we had that knowledge from across the water, which was great. So it probably sped up the commissioning part of the process.
Yeah. And does Ireland have the capacity to fulfill the demand for the Irish wheat for distillation? Is there enough capacity there?
If things like what happened last year in the malting industry continue to happen, you know, with that unfortunate fire, etc., cause damage to certain facilities. So it really depends, you know, when you're dealing with your suppliers, how the year's gone. And unfortunately, the way the world is, you know, weather patterns changing, wetter summers, you know, it is making it more challenging for growers. So we'll continue to source as much as we can from Ireland. It's in our interest to do so. But if we have to go abroad, you know, that'll just be a reality of availability rather than anything else. So hopefully, and I think as you know, we're into the 30s now, 30 something distilleries in Ireland, 33, 34.
Yeah.
Starting to say that we're building a significant enough industry that you would hope more and more of these growers are going to get involved and start growing more of these grains that we want.
Yeah. Yeah. Just going back, there's a question there from James who's asking about the is the ambassador of today the charismatic salesman of 20 years ago, pulling sales through rather than the sales guy pushing sales out? So that's,
I think it's a really good question from a man who knows a bit about the whiskey business now, to be fair.
Yeah,
he's a bit of a genius himself. Yeah, exactly. The truth of the matter is that there's not, I want to say there's not much role. You can only do so much as a salesman. You can, as James says, you can push it in to the places and you can have it stocked. But if it sits on the shelf and it gathers dust, it's not doing anybody any favors. And, you know, a lot of our lives will be spent, Kevin will agree with this, we go into bars and we're like paranoid. I mean, my wife can't stand going to bars with me because all I'm doing is look behind the shelf to see what's on display and what's on optic or what's being poured, etc., etc. And it's like, ever relax and just let us have something to eat or have a drink, and, you know. So that's the way we live. But the truth is, being behind the bar isn't enough. Yeah, taking James's point, you need somebody to get it out there and to get it across the bar, and you need to have reasons, or the bartender needs to have reasons to pour your whiskey over another one. And that's really what ambassadors do. We work at making sure that there are reasons out there why consumers would want to drink your whiskey, but particularly why the trade would want to recommend it.
Yeah, yeah. I suppose another question then is the power of three. It's very much associated with Tullamore DEW, and perhaps you might just want to explain to our viewers, for those that don't know, what is encompassed in that power of three statement? Maybe Kevin, you want to take a look at that?
Go for it. Yeah, so our liquid, the Tullamore DEW original, a lot of our core expressions are triple distilled. They mature in 3 types of casks, and they're 3 styles of whiskey blended together. So it's that 3, 3, and 3 that comes through. So triple distillation, 3 maturation types casks, and then you've got 3 Irish whiskey styles: your grain, your malt, and your pot still. So you've got a huge contribution of different flavors and different attributes, all culminating in this sort of power of 3 idea.
Yeah. And when obviously the distillery stopped producing whiskey in 1974, the old distillery, and since 2014 you've been producing your own. When is that spirit going to be incorporated in what you're producing now, and how's that transition going to be managed without huge change to the product?
Yeah, I mean, it's a slow transition. It started late 2019. That process started where some of the malt and pot from our distillery has been used in the blend, and will slowly transition over the next, say, 2021, 22. We should be getting very close to having 100% Tullamore DEW liquid in the bottle, which is incredibly exciting.
Yeah, and presumably having your own distillery now and having your own maturation warehouse there, it really opens up the possibilities of further innovation. And I know you have a lot of experimental casks, certainly. Anything lined up for the future that you can talk about?
Do you want to tell them, John?
The last bit of the sentence was great.
Yeah.
We could talk. Look, we're first of all, we have a sizable business that we have to keep turning over with producing what pays the bills, obviously. We are, because we have there's a complexity in our whiskey in terms of the number of styles of whiskies and the different maturation regimen that's there. We have a lot of different whiskies being matured in different cask types, and a lot of experimentation is going on in wood, even some with mash bills, etc. So yeah, there obviously will be launches in the future. It's not something we're rushing into. We didn't feel the need to launch like a 3 or a 4-year-old whiskey just because it was legally available for sale. We didn't think that was the right thing for us to do. It would be obviously for others that they have a different thought process, and therefore there's some thought that's go into innovation. You're trying to make sure that whatever you do represents your distillery well, but also represents your brand's history and its DNA. So they're all the kind of things that we get into our discussion. Nothing we can talk about, sir, just to be fair. I'm sure you'd be the first person we would tell if and when we have. But for the moment, there's nothing we can talk about. But there's an awful lot of work going on in innovation. Yeah, an awful lot. People who've been to our distillery, including you, have seen some of the stuff in casks and that, but nothing to turn them up. Sorry, Kevin.
No, I was just going to add that, there was ideas of things we were hoping to maybe release this year, but wasn't possibly the year to do it. So maybe next year we'll see some of that, but probably keeping some of it under wraps for the moment. But as John said, definitely being strategic in deciding what's right to release and not rushing anything, making sure it's literally the best it can possibly be when we're under no commercial need to release whiskies just for the sake of it or to flood the market or to make it, noise. As John says, we're sort of busy making whiskey.
There's one comment there from Lisa, and she's asking, if you could innovate and blend without restriction, what would you love to do with the brand?
That is not a fair question. Lisa is the wife of one of our head distillers. So.
Okay.
Aha. I know that she is.
What would you love to do with the brand?
If I can make a comment on it. I don't know if this is fair or not fair, but from my side anyway, the perception is that Tullamore DEW is a fantastic brand. It produces great whiskey, and yet it doesn't get the coverage at home that it should or it deserves. I mean, it's obviously a huge global brand. It's second only to Jameson. What's the thinking behind that, and how can we get to learn more about Tullamore DEW here locally?
I'm going to jump in on this one. I always joke that there was a sales rep in Ireland 20 years ago who slept with Tullamore DEW, who slept with everyone's wife, because you'd meet people who would say, I hate Tullamore, and you're like, have you ever had it? And they would say no. And people would genuinely not like the brand, and you would question them on it, and they wouldn't actually have an answer, which always astounded me. Like, just an unknowingness where it came from. So it's a really good question. One thing I am proud to say is we doubled the business in Ireland in the last 3 years. So that is positive, going the right direction. I mean, we have done a lot more. Even this year, the amount of PR we've got from a coverage standpoint has been higher than any other year. So we've definitely decided to upweight that because of the importance of the home market.
Obviously, it's an important market, but it's relatively small to the big numbers that you're doing abroad. I mean,
our business in Ireland is not huge. There's no doubt. We've grown great in the last 12, 24 months. We've had good growth, but our business in Ireland is not huge. And suppose if we didn't have a significant business in other parts of the world, we might lie awake worrying about our lack of press coverage or PR coverage in Ireland. But when it comes to if you live in, as I do, in Glasnevin in Dublin, you may not hear an awful lot being spoken about in terms of Tullamore DEW. But if you live in other parts of the world where Tullamore DEW is significant, like I'm thinking of Czech Republic or Poland, and we have lads on.
I mean, you're number one in many countries as well, not just number two. You're not playing.
No, absolutely. We have a couple of guys who are on tonight. I'm going to give them a wave, called Gentlemen of Tullamore. They live in Prague. You know what I mean? They don't live in Tullamore. They're the gentlemen, and they're all going to start waving back now. But so we have a big presence and a big notoriety in many countries around the world. So when you talk about Sweden or Denmark or Germany or Czech or Slovakia and places like that, we're the number one selling Irish whiskey, and in some of the markets the number one selling whiskey. So I don't want to say people say Glenavon is the dead centre of Dublin. It's but it's not the centre of the world by any means, and I know that. On the other hand, I do feel that probably some of the media people don't get all the story, in the sense they're terribly interested in the number one brand that's huge globally, or they're terribly interested in something that's brand new onto the market. And they are good news stories. There's probably not a sexy news story in the fact that the second biggest brand globally, or the biggest brand in some markets, is not doing anything wild in terms of making statements around Ireland to get them to write stories, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take a couple of examples. For example, this 18-year-old that I'm drinking, and the Phoenix as well, I'll point out as well. I think two, without a doubt, outstanding whiskies at extremely good prices, you know, for what they are, and yet they don't seem to get the coverage or the accolades that they would deserve. I mean, that 18 you could put against any 18-year-old very, very comfortably. In fact,
well, you know, in terms of accolades, to be fair, the 18-year-old was the only Irish whiskey that was awarded a trophy at probably the most prestigious of the international wine spirits competition, the IWSC, in 2018. It was the only Irish whiskey that got a trophy. So in some ways, the cognoscenti do give us some credit in terms of the 18-year-old. I agree. First of all, we don't have a huge amount of stock of it available, Sergis. It's on allocation for every market. So that's the first thing. But you know, to be fair, everybody has their own favorites and their own what they want to drink. And even if you would see that or feel that we don't get credit in this country, maybe we get more credit elsewhere. Maybe.
Michael Fogarty there, I'm sure you'll know, L. Mulligan's. He says, will you bring that back to 4-cask maturation, 10-year-old single malt? Oh, that's fantastic whiskey as well.
It was.
And very hard to find now.
And the answer is no, Michael. I think Michael Fogarty's asked me this before, but he's like a dog with a bone. The reality was that was a double distilled whiskey, which was a magnificent whiskey, with 4-cask finish, was a magnificent delivery on the palate. But it's not part of what we are. We're very much focused on our, you know, this power of three messaging that Kevin was talking about, and that's the way we roll, as it were. Yeah, I actually said that's the way we roll, making it sound like I'm 28 and a half years old. God.
So cool.
Yeah, very hipster, John. Very hip. Obviously, the lessons are paying off, Kevin.
Oh, yeah.
And you have media trained too.
The 14 and the 18 are like a continuation of that. The same cask regimen idea was followed through to deliver the flavors that people really liked from that. So the real difference was a double distill versus a triple distill liquid. So the 14, the 18 were, you know, continuations of that idea, albeit the distillation process being different, just for answer Michael. I feel I didn't really answer Lisa's question. I mean, there's a million things we'd love to do, and her husband knows this, but you know, a lot of work with original mash bills. We already are doing some incredible stuff behind the scenes and innovation that we just can't speak about. But I'd love to play with flavors of, you know, in terms of casks, about flavors you could put in casks as opposed to liquids. That's something I'd love to see a bit more playful and experimenting to really push boundaries.
Yeah. Tell me,
and then the old guy says, hold on a minute, you don't play around with stuff that you're not supposed to do. Like keep it the traditional stuff. That's what the old guy said. You know, and don't be. He says he'd love to play around. Oh my God, I hate when people want to play around. It's driving me mad.
Yeah. Tell me, obviously your parent company, William Grant, they own some huge brands. So Glenfiddich, Balvenie, Grant's, and then other spirits, you know, was Drambuie and Hendrick's Gin. What kind of cross knowledge training is there, and is it useful in terms of the Tullamore DEW brand?
Can I jump in here, John?
Yeah, absolutely.
So when I started, Leslie Gracie, the head distiller for Hendrick's, gave us some of our training because she's a trained chemist and would have showed us, she would have done a few seminars on barrel maturation. I still use some of the learnings from that session. I would say there's huge knowledge. You could walk into the control room in Tullamore and they could be ringing Glenfiddich about a malt processing point of view or something. So absolutely, I think that's probably the best thing about the company. If you have 9 or 10 distilleries, you're able to ring up Balvenie and see a learning that they had with the Caribbean rum cask and bring that in the form of XO. So I would say that's one of our biggest strengths as a company. We're not, individually trying to figure things out. We have this incredible legacy of whiskey making. And one of the last times I drank with you was in Toners when we saw Brian Kingsman.
Yes, that's a great night.
Globally in whiskey. And, he's behind Tullamore. How lucky are we to have, some of the smaller brands are starting with people who are getting into the game and love it. But Brian is a king in the industry. So to have him overseeing Tullamore's blending is incredibly fortunate for the Tullamore brand.
Yeah. I suppose one of the things that's new now on the site, well, we're talking huge investment for a start. I mean, it must be close to 100 million that's been invested in the building and on the site. It's a 58-acre site in Clonminch, and you have distillation, maturation, bottling, cooperage. I know you were expanding the maturation side of it. What are you up to now in terms of capacity?
Go ahead, Kev, go ahead.
Well, at the moment, we've 264,000 casks full on site at the moment.
Right, okay.
So, we obviously would have had a lot, but now we're actually not just filling casks, we're emptying them as well. So the process is really nice. Me and John were in a warehouse today seeing casks being taken out. And for a long time, we were just looking at casks being put in. So that's been a slow process. You've been down the distillery and we've been very much playing the waiting game. So it's nice to see that coming into fruition. Yeah, we're on 8 or 9 warehouses at this point, stacked 7 high. Yeah. We can put 50,000 in a warehouse if we want. We've started some small selection of racked casks for some of our wine casks, just for a bit of experimentation to see how the different sort of oxidative effects.
Yeah. How do you sort your casks?
How do we sort them?
Source.
I mean, John, you want to?
We're part of the William Grant's group, Sergio.
Yeah.
So William Grant's will be one of the top 3 or 4 buyers of casks in the world because of the size of Grant's whiskey in Scotland, the size of Glenfiddich, Balvenie, all of those, and obviously Tully on top of that. So we're William Grant's group is a big buyer of casks, and so where our casks are sourced through that buying facility, which makes sure that we get the best possible selection, the most appropriate casks for Tullamore DEW. And that, to be fair, because we're big buyers, we probably buy at a reasonable price. I wouldn't say get them cheap, no casks are cheap, but we probably don't pay over the top because of the fact that we are part of a big group. Yeah.
So do you have a cooperage there now?
Yep,
Kevin.
Yeah, so obviously when you've got so many casks coming in, the cooper was on holidays, so there's a build-up of casks stacking up there. God love him when he comes back to work. We have a 30-year-old Angron, who's the head cooper. He's French, and we had some south of France people on there earlier, so bonsoir. Really nice to have his expertise coming from Scotland, having worked in some of our other cooperages, has some really interesting experience from France itself, and him and a few guys doing a lot of work down there. So really good. He can finish 9 hours working with casks. He goes home and he'll send me pictures. He's building guitars at home.
Oh, really?
So real commitment to his craft. Just one of these guys who, it's not like he wants to get home from a hard enough day and kick up his feet. He's actually, still owning his craft, which is very cool. So I'm excited to see how we get to use him more in the future and how important it is to have him. I think there's only 4 cooperages in Ireland, correct me if I'm wrong, out of 33 distilleries or so. So it's just such an important part of quality checks, and it gives us extra knowledge in that wood space that I don't think we'd have otherwise.
Yeah, I see you gave us an example of your fluency in French, which I know, John, you have an incredible grasp of languages. I say French, Spanish, some Portuguese and Italian, and a bit of Gaeilge.
Yeah, and bad language.
Yes, that too.
Most proficient at that. Yeah, no, I've learned to speak some languages on the way. To be fair, in Irish distillers, they sent me off to France to learn French. CNC sent me off to Spain to learn Spanish. I spent a lot of time in South America and working in those markets, and Portuguese. I mean, like, Portuguese wouldn't be brilliant by any means, but I'd never go hungry, and I would be thirsty, and you know what I mean. So generally, I can communicate, and my Italian is. I mean, I don't know why I say I speak Italian. I learned to speak some Italian. Again, I wouldn't go hungry, but it'd be like, let's just say, no, I'm not from Italy. Let's put it that way. So I wouldn't put any big one.
Okay. Va bene, va bene. Okay.
Va bene. Yeah, molto bene. No. Yeah. And then the Gaelic, that's just something I had an interest in all my life. Just was as a language, and I suppose there's a bit of me as well that sort of feels that if you're able to speak other people's languages, you should really be able to speak your own if you can at all. So my Gaelic isn't perfect at all, but at least I communicate it, and I do try to do a bit of work trying to keep it going. You know, actually in our offices in Dublin recently, when we still had people going to the office, I had a few Gaelic classes at lunchtime. So we all sat around and taught each other what we remembered from school, etc. And that was great because people were very enthusiastic, including people in our offices who were not born and raised in Ireland, and even English isn't their first language, so they were keen to learn. I remember one of the lads from Brazil, Dan, and Dan said, I asked him, is anything you have to learn how to say in Irish? And he said, how do you say in Irish that in this country it always effing rains? Or some such expression.
It never rains in sunny Ireland. The people from abroad listening, and we want to keep the tourism numbers up.
Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot that. Tourism.
Yeah. So obviously that's a thing that's been really knocked on the head. I mean, you guys aren't traveling, presumably, and you haven't been traveling for the last while. Is that something you miss?
Yeah.
Yeah, we miss the queues in the airports, and we miss the queues trying to get on flights, and the queues to get off flights and all that. No, the truth is, can I speak?
Go for it.
Normally, I don't get a word in edgeways. So, no, what we miss being in the places. But actually, we've had a few really good experiences with people in markets who needed us to have them. Actually, Kevin, tell them about Chile and South America and the recent one we did.
I was going to say about our last travel trip that we should talk about that just before the shutdown. Me and John went on a road trip
together.
We went to our to south of Spain to see some of our casks being made with Antonio Paez, and that was incredible. That was 2 weeks before lockdown. We were supposed to go back for a conference in May, and Spain was. It was incredible to see those casks being made, and all that sort of. That was a fun trip for sure.
Down to Jerez, that was brilliant. Yeah. And then, well, tell the guys about the online stuff we've done with South America recently.
Yeah, so I guess utilizing John's Spanish and my insulting Spanish, we would have ran some seminars for different bar schools, but we actually had a partnership with the bartender school in Chile, and we had over 323 bartenders come on to learn about Irish whiskey in a seminar. So it was quite broad in that they were learning about the styles of Irish whiskey, and I think that was really exciting for me and John to go, holy crap, there's a huge audience really keen to learn about Irish whiskey in a part of the world that we're not very big in. Irish whiskey in Latin America is not very strong, but it was very positive to see that numbers coming online. I think they were shocked. They didn't think they had. I personally have never seen that on a whiskey seminar. It's very hard to get those numbers, and me and John done lots of things where we've struggled to get numbers. So this is definitely, we were really relieved and excited to see that that's somewhere, we may be going in the future to that part of the world a bit more, and to see just the interest, and that's exciting. There's definitely places that are a little bit untouched for Irish whiskey, so definitely makes sense to visit there more in the future.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Sorry, just to amplify that a bit, like if Kevin or I went to Chile or Argentina or wherever to meet bartenders, we could meet 15 or 20 in one night, and then another night we might meet another 15 or 20 on a really good night, because it's hard to get bartenders available. You know what I mean? They're working.
Sure, yeah.
But on one call we had 300, and I thought it was 350, but anyway. And they were calling in from all over Latin America. It wasn't just Chile. They were calling from all over Latin America. We were having great banter back and forth with them. And I was talking whiskey, and Kevin was talking mixology and all of that, and how Tully is, will help them in their roles. And it was thrilling to think that over 300 people you could talk to, and you couldn't do that if you traveled. So there's a lesson in that, you know what I mean? So as difficult as it is, there's some positives out of this COVID thing and being online.
Yeah. I mean, we're definitely seeing a lot of interest in ourselves, I suppose, from South America lately, particularly Argentina, actually, funny enough. But it's very much a growing market. What do you see as the emerging markets going forward?
Mira, you have?
I'll let you take it, John.
Okay. I mean, there are some parts of the world where Irish whiskey is significantly underdeveloped, and we've mentioned one of them being Latin America. And the reason that's significant as well is because Scotch whiskey is well developed in those places. I mean, Colombia, traditionally, Venezuela was a very strong market. Brazil is a very strong market. Argentina and Chile, less so, but also growing for Scotch whiskey. And there's a great interest in Irish whiskey in those places now. And some of us are, doing a bit of work to set the ground there, etc. So that's one part of the world that's ripe. That comes with caveats around politics and economies and that kind of thing. So you have to be a little bit careful with that. I mean, there's no doubt Asia is untapped for Irish whiskey. And again, Scotch is very strong in some parts of places like Taiwan, obviously China. Even Japan and places, and Irish whiskey is significantly underdeveloped there. Some of the challenges around developing Irish whiskey in these markets can be around things like knowing that Ireland is a different place from Scotland, for example. But at some level, you might even stop trying to claim country of origin and rather just claim brand with a great taste. And that's been successful in some places that didn't necessarily need to know the county in Ireland you're coming from, but loved the taste and loved the presentation of the pack, or maybe loved your advertising messages. So there's a little bit around finding a balance there.
Yeah.
Sorry, Kev.
John,
I don't know.
Yeah.
John, I mean, one of your other roles, obviously, a global brand ambassador for Tullamore DEW, but you're also vice chairman of the Irish Whiskey Association, and I assume soon to be president at the upcoming elections, if there's any. And what does that entail? Your role, and I know I've spoken to Mr. William Lavelle on a number of occasions. There's an awful lot of things that happen behind the scenes that the general public wouldn't be aware of, and it's vital, and we touched upon it in the news. Firstly, the protection of Irish whiskey, but there are other things that the Irish Whiskey Association is heavily involved in. Can you touch on those briefly and explain where they're heading with?
I mean, the Irish Whiskey Association, is a collection of, I guess, 90% of the whiskey producers in Ireland represented there. So we represent the industry at many levels. I mean, obviously, in terms of the industry's interest in the geopolitical area of Brexit or the EU, labeling in the EU, protecting the category, as you mentioned, in terms of other parts of the world where people launch Irish whiskies that aren't from Ireland, or claim an Irish style whiskey, or put Shamrock on a label, etc. That's a huge challenge for us to make sure that we are protected, and we protect ourselves in those markets by registering and having what we call GI certification, geographical indication certification, so that if we get that certification, as we did in Belarus when you mentioned, which you mentioned earlier, Sergis, if we get that, then we are protected, and the local government gives us protection in terms of others cannot launch a whiskey that claims to be Irish whiskey having without deference to the GI that we have to protect us. So we get protection, and we work really hard at getting protection in markets around the world. So we do that. But we have things like we have technical committees where the producers sit together, all the various distillers sit together and discuss technical issues that need to be discussed. We have a tourism committee that meets to discuss how we will promote the category to tourists. That's a real challenge this year. We have a trade and promotions committee. How can we do trade and promotions for the category around the world that's not brand specific? And with my Irish whiskey industry hat on, I play the role of vice chair, but now coming up to be chair, of making sure that the industry is well represented. And I take off my Tullamore DEW hat, very, very much so, to represent all the whiskey producers and marketers for all the brands. And I struggle to make sure that I do that, and I will continue to make sure that I do that in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I presume COVID is the biggest single threat at the moment, but there are other obstacles, there are challenges in the way. So Brexit and US trade wars, do you want to talk about those? I assume that Brexit is actually the biggest one.
Well, Brexit is huge, but I mean, the big market for Irish whiskey is the US. So
sure.
So the US trade and EU negotiations with a view to getting a trade agreement between the two, such that we would have free trade, in other words, without tariffs. I mean, that's a huge thing now. There are tariffs on Irish whiskey. There are tariffs on whiskies from Northern Ireland into the US now, on single malts from Northern Ireland into the US. So that's a real challenge. What we would want is that is removed, and there are tariffs on US whiskies coming into EU. That's had a significant hit on both of those categories, US whiskies in the EU and Irish single malts from Northern Ireland in the US. So we would be lobbying hard with the Irish government to make sure that our representatives in the EU and talking with our EU partners would really seriously consider pulling out and taking away any tariffs that don't necessarily have to be there. This tariff issue is a bigger, it's actually to do with an airline, aircraft production.
The Airbus and the Boeing dispute.
Exactly. And it's spilled over into other products, including some whiskies. So first of all, we want to make sure it doesn't spill over into any more Irish whiskies. And obviously then we want to hopefully get rid of it get rid of tariffs in total. And I think there's some progress has been made in very recent weeks on that. So hopefully it is. But obviously Brexit is a huge issue as well. And it's not least an issue because some of the Irish whiskies come from Northern Ireland and therefore come from the UK, which is separating from Europe. Therefore, there are challenges around that and how they get how we continue to be treated as Irish whiskey generally, but don't suffer any disadvantages of being that come from the UK.
Yeah. Kevin, just in relation to the people that are drinking whiskey now, and I think you might be more in touch maybe with the new set of Irish whiskey drinkers, which generally is a younger demographic now, being attracted to Irish whiskey. How do you see that's changed, and how do you address reaching the younger audience and also the female audience?
Yeah, that is a really good question.
Kevin about women. Don't ask Kevin about women.
Yeah, please. John told me not to talk about Tinder on this call, so I promised I won't. To your point, I think experiences become so much more important. If you told people, oh, we're going to come to a whiskey tasting tonight, would you like to go? The average person probably doesn't want to go there, but if it's a storytelling and spoken word, if it's a comedy and music with sort of whiskey as a part of that, I think it becomes far more appealing. So it's sort of broadening the appeal just beyond how my grandfather drank it, and definitely cocktails being an avenue. I mean, I admitted very openly when I started with Tullamore, I didn't like whiskey, and now I 100% just want it on the rocks or neat most of the time. I definitely drank whiskey and ginger at the start, but I'm getting very close to not standing that at the moment. It's too sugary. So I guess I'm the exact person or showcase that It was too strong. The first time I had it, about 8 years ago in the visitor centre, I tasted this. I was going, oh God, I hope I don't have to sell this stuff. You know, I wasn't used to whiskey. And I hadn't developed a palate from it. My college drinking, none of my friends drank whiskey. It really didn't have that impact. And now that's completely changed, which is great. But I still see people, even who I know, who pretend to like whiskey, but the reality is they'd love to be drinking it in mixed drinks and other ways. And I think there's a lot of bravado still there that people want to enjoy it neat. I bought a really nice whiskey that it wasn't my brand for a friend's birthday the other day, and he actually didn't want it. And he was like, I'll just take your XO, and he was mixing it with ginger beer. And the other whiskey was quite expensive, and I thought I'll buy him something that isn't Tullamore so he won't think I got it for free. And he actually didn't want it. And here's a guy who talks about whiskey a bit, but the reality was he just wanted, you know, probably a more refreshing mixed drink. So just that sort of showed me. And he's 30, he's not 22 either, you know.
Yeah. Can you, obviously, you've nearly 8-9 years experience as a brand ambassador. For somebody that wants to join the industry and become a brand ambassador and get involved in the trade, what experience would you give them, Kevin? What have you learned that you would say, oh, I wish I knew this starting off?
There's a book to answer that, maybe.
Don't tell them about your experiences, Kevin. Invent you.
Tell apart from having a fantastic mentor, of course.
I know John is, to be fair, I slag him a lot, but there's no better person to. I see someone saying I have big shoes to fill. I feel like Moyes, and this is Ferguson, so I know the feeling. I think the experience. My advice would be really think: is it what you want to do? A lot of people come up to us all the time and sort of, oh, I want to be ambassador, and I think because they think it's going to be an easy job. And I can look at lots of bartenders who went and became ambassadors, and they're back bartenders, and they didn't hack it. They think it's easy because we might be coming in during the day having a coffee talking about whiskey, but they don't see all the behind the scenes. And I think, you know, ex-ambassadors will attest to that. Unless you're in the ring doing it yourself, you'll realize how difficult it is and how much other competition is out there and how many bars already have 200 whiskeys. So I think you need to be resilient, and I think you have to love different people, culture, history. You need to be really open-minded. You know, I once heard someone in a bar say, oh, I can't believe you don't like whiskey. Why do you like vodka for? Vodka sucks. You know, that's not the attitude to have. You got to love drinks. You got to love everything beyond whiskey. You have to love pubs. You have to love people, conversation, because that's what it's about. It's not just whiskey. So if you're quite myopic in your thinking, and you think, oh, I'm just going to play this card because whiskey's cool now, people will see through that, and you won't sort of stand the test of time.
Yeah, I definitely think that. I mean, certainly the younger generation, they're more interested in experiences than my teenage years or younger years, anyway.
Absolutely.
But what is it you love about your job? Assuming you do, so be careful.
No, I mean, I wouldn't be here 8 years later if I didn't. I think I like the performing part. I like the creativity. Me and John have had sessions with New Liquid this week where we were able to sit down, ask a master blender what we wanted, and he gave us different combinations of styles of whiskey and a whole other spectrum of ideas, and we got to taste and explore who those would appeal to, what they tasted like, how they were made. I listened to your session with Carol Quinn, and like her love of history, she was actually astounding. I've met her before, but I didn't appreciate. I watched that end to end, and it gave me a bit of a renewed appreciation of the history of this, and that's something that I take from John every time, that I probably wouldn't have that appreciation of the history and the people behind it. And that's a beautiful thing. I know there's a few questions there, and I'm going to really quickly answer them as well. That leads into a history question. So the cask are vertical, the bungs are they on the heads of the cask? Yes. So we take bourbon barrels that have a bung on the side, but we drill in on top. So they have two bungs actually, but we drill the one on top. The second, any chance of us doing a peated whiskey? No, we're an ironic whiskey. We're built on a peat bog, but we're not going to do a peated whiskey. I'm sorry. The other question was, someone asked me at the very start if I knew Tom McCabe. Tom was one of the original distillers. He came back as the guest of honor to open up the distillery in 2014. I actually lived with a girl in New York when I was an ambassador, and her family lived beside him in New Jersey. And she'd asked me if I wanted to meet this man. He used to work at the old distillery in Tullamore. And to be honest, I was like, I don't even know who he is. Did he drive a truck for a day? I'd heard lots of old people claim that they had worked in Tullamore, and it transpired they did very little, or that wasn't quite the truth. So I turned that down, and she texted me the day he passed away, and I think then the business would have let me know, maybe it was January 6th or 7th, 2015, after him only being at the distillery opening September 17th.
He was at the opening. I remember John sharing that story. That's an amazing story. That
yes, with Denise, and I'll let John tell that. But it's just once again that whole idea of a growing appreciation of history and the people behind it, and at the start being a bit, oh, do I really want to hear that story from that man? And now I want to hear everything these people have to hear and glean those sort of little nuggets from their experience and their stories. And John has a great one about Tom.
Do you want to share that with us, John, then?
Yeah. Well, so we were sitting on early 2014, and we were planning the opening of the distillery in September. And we were working out who needed to be invited and how many we could accommodate. Honestly, it was tough because we could really only take in 300 people. There was a whole lot of people from our own company, but we had a whole lot of people from around the world, from our distributors, who we really wanted to bring over. And then we got a letter from this man and saying that he'd love to come to the distillery he used to work at. And somebody said to me, oh, there's a letter from somebody who's coming from the States and he wants an invitation. I said, we just can't give any old nobody an invitation. Like, we're struggling with it. And I got the letter, and I said, this guy used to work here. Talked to a man named Michael Byrne, who was a local historian in Tullamore. He said, that's Tom McCabe, who was the last still man who closed the distillery. It turned off still in 1954. I thought, oh my God. He was 23, I think, at the time. And when he wrote to us, he was in his 70s and said, look, no, it was early 80s actually, I think. He said, look, I'd love to come over. And he wanted to bring his family. Now he wanted 5 invitations. Oh my God, sure, we were already oversubscribed. Long story short, we invited him to come along. It turned out he had become a very wealthy partner in JP Morgan in New York when he left Tullamore as a still man, went over to the States, made his fortune, and brought his whole family home with him to see the new distillery. And he was the most magnificent man. But the real story was on the night before the opening, we had a party at the visitor center. He was introduced to the new distillery manager, who was a woman called Denise Devaney. And Denise Tom handed over the distillery to Denise. Serge is gone, bored out of his mind. I don't blame him. But handed over the keys to the old, from the old master distiller to the new. And that night, had a great old dancing experience with Denise. So it was a great night, great event, and subsequently sent Denise a letter. We always think it was a love letter. Not sure if it was, but anyway, there we go. I feel I'm
John, me and you can start asking each other questions now. We'll run the show, Sergius.
You won't get away with it that easily.
You won't. We're this close.
Yeah.
Sergius, I don't know much you missed, but there was a great punchline there with bad language and everything. So, you know.
Oh, we don't condone that kind of language on this show, John. I have to put you on the naughty step.
That's right.
But
not for the first time.
One of the things I did want to ask is, John, you're 30 years with the company now, pretty much. You're not going to end up like Daniel Williams, who was there for 60 years in the company. Any plans to retire anytime within the near future, or do you see yourself with the company for a while?
So people doing their sums would be saying low 40 years in this business now, but and there's a whole queue of people who think I should retire. Most of them live in this house, but to be fair, I'm not planning a retirement. One can never be sure when one's retirement is planned by somebody else, but at the moment I'm not planning a retirement. But on the other hand, having Batman and me being Robin, which sounds really counterintuitive, but having somebody else beside me, he's obviously well able to share the role with me. And if and when in the future, if I'm not around, that role is in good stead. For the moment, though, I don't have a plan, Sergio. But maybe over time things will change and I'll slow down a bit or whatever. But at the moment, I'm
Sergio,
really enjoying what I'm
he's
doing.
the David Attenborough of Irish whiskey. He's not going away. I'm sorry.
He'll do his 60 years like Daniel did.
Sergio's in 8 years in the company, I've never gone to bed after him. He always outlasts me. The man is on some form of, I don't know what it is.
Kevin.
Can we get into the substance?
My wife Sheila is watching this, Kevin. Would you stop talking now?
Sheila, so we need to know what drugs he's on.
Obviously, your wife Sheila is a very understanding woman.
She is.
Yeah.
I'm a patient.
I mean, it must be. What's it like being home all the time now? Essentially, like in terms of family life and in terms of personally.
Ask Sheila. Sheila thinks it's awful. No, to be fair, I like Kevin Piggot. For me, there's some, like for everybody, there's some great advantages and disadvantages. And the great advantages is I'm here all the time, and I get a lot of time to the grandchildren and my children and that kind of thing. And the disadvantages is you feel a little bit detached from your friends in Czech and other places. It's advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah, I have to say, when I put the post up about the podcast, I was amazed from the reach that people kind of noticed it from. It was people from South America, it was people from America, it was people from Far Eastern Europe, from Asia. It just goes to show the breadth and reach that the brand does have. And I think maybe we don't see that here.
Yeah, I keep telling my friends, if I depended on my friends who live in Swords, if I depended on them to put my kids through college, geez, my kids would have been so badly educated. So our reach is far and wide, thank God. Yeah, thank God.
Yeah. Tell me, I have one video I want to share, and I want to share it because I think it was certainly one of our most viewed posts that we put up, and I think you'll have both seen this before, but let me see if I can actually manage this.
There's John dancing in his garden.
Shut up.
Oh, Kevin. No, I had to censor that one.
Okay, fair enough.
But let me see if I can do this.
Don't worry, John, I didn't share that video with Sergius. A promise is a promise.
No, I can't do it at the moment.
I wanted to. Which one you didn't share with?
No, I wanted to share a video that I can't unfortunately share. It was the one where you were opening the distillery in the Bond Room, Kevin.
Yeah, the Bond Room. Yeah, sure. People can go on your Facebook for the Irish Whiskey Magazine. They can find it. Even on Twitter, it's quite easy to find.
Yeah.
It's just a really cool sort of surprise shot of the distillery floor and the stills.
We had one question in there about when the new visitor centre will be open.
Next summer.
That was from Peter Pulkert. Yeah. The plan is June of next year. That's the plan.
June.
Yeah. We have a lot of work to do in terms of reordering and renovating, as it were, what we have in our magnificent distillery and in our distillery house. And people who've been there will know how beautiful it is. But it's not really set up to receive visitors in a way that you'd have reception, etc. So that reception areas, etc. So that needs to be worked on. Yeah.
I'm going to see if I can somehow manage to show this. Okay, so bear with me.
Take it on video.
Aha. So we do have it.
That's a bit of a stretch, yeah. Oh, you might have to replay that again, Sergius.
Oh, we missed it. Let's see. Let's try it again, because it's worth saying. I have too many windows. Play again. Okay. No, we don't have the capability. Unfortunately, as I said, it's on our webpage. Unfortunately, we don't. But I do have something else to share, which and John, maybe you can tell us in your In your spare time, how do you relax and enjoy yourself? Any hobbies? Anything you'd like to do outside of?
Yeah. So in my spare time, I go to the golf club a lot.
Right.
Every weekend, and I'd have to say I might be the worst golfer I've ever played with. But I absolutely enjoy it. So I do that quite a bit. I'm now cycling a bit. I got myself a bike. And Sheila got herself an electric bike. So we're now cycling around the city and different parts of the city we didn't know existed, etc. And so I'm doing that a bit. I do have a guitar, which I don't play very well, but I do pick up and I sing to myself, because if there was anybody within earshot, they'd run, that kind of thing. So that's and I'm sort of involved with the GAA club in Dublin called Triana in Glasnevin, and I have a little bit of stuff that I can get involved with there too. That's really boring actually. No. And I have six grandchildren who are the.
You have more grandchildren than you have hands. That's the problem.
That's true.
Or the opportunity.
They're the best children in Ireland, if anyone wants to know. I love spending time with them.
Kevin, let me just. Firstly, I wanted to try and explain this photo. I suppose would be one thing. So, I think around the 20th of September, you were sitting in Grafton Street for 5 hours. I'm not sure doing exactly what, but tell us about that experience.
Yeah, I guess a few years ago, I probably recognized that I wanted to push boundaries of my things I was comfortable with. So I created a rule: every 30 days, I do 3 things outside my comfort zone. And in 2017, I had read up that there was a global eye contact experiment in 62 countries around the world where people were sharing eye contact, or you could talk or chat with people. And it was just to rebuild human connection. And in a world where people were more lonely, more depressed, there's a lot more mental health issues. And I was just really intrigued by it. I went down to sit down for 10 minutes and I did it for 3 hours the first year. So the subsequent year, no one wanted to run it in Dublin. So I did it in Paris the year after. And then this year, if I actually showed you pictures from the first year, there's probably 60, 70 people sitting down doing it. So I'm not the only crazy. But a few people joined me for the first 3 hours, and then I just got such a positive response. I continued to sit down for the other 2 hours after that. And it's been a really tough year, myself included. Really hard, just if you're used to being out socializing and having such a wide social group, and then living in I'm in my bedroom right now, so you're just not getting the same social interact. I think we all as human beings crave connection. So I built this screen. I wanted to be outside and make it as safe as possible. It was just an opportunity for people to sit down and share a moment of human connection. So
it's a very important point, I think, Kevin. I think it was really an amazing thing you did, because particularly for the bartender staff and those in the hospitality sector whose living and livelihood is based around meeting and connecting with people, to suddenly lose that must be like losing a body part almost, and of course the mental well-being of people is hugely important. Is there anything you can suggest or think of that can help people in that situation?
I guess my heart goes out to a lot of bartenders. It's been a really tough few months for them. I think I'd love people just to reach out, and we do this. I do morning swims out in the 40-foot. We do hikes most weekends when we're allowed to leave the county outside in the Wicklow Mountains. If any bartender wants to come up with me, I think it's just fresh air, exercise, try and meet people in safe ways. That was one of my goals of this year, to get out more in nature and appreciate it. In this business, it's very easy to be out a lot and party a bit more than the average person. So I need to counterbalance it with a lot of sort of nice connection with people, but outside in nature. I'm probably going to do this experiment in more cities when the lockdown breaks. I'll probably do it in Galway, maybe Cork. I'm willing to go anywhere that'll that'll take me on their streets, so it won't be too hard.
What was your biggest eye opener on this, doing this?
There's just, I think for a week or two on the news, like you get a bit depressed listening to it and how bleak everything is in US politics and Brexit, you know, the list goes on, an existential crisis. But this was 66 people sitting down with me who were kind, warm-hearted people who just wanted to connect. I had an 80-year-old man, an Italian man who spoke no English. His son helped him get down on his, and you can see that position's not difficult. I said I'd do it standing with him. Yeah. He was adamant, he wanted to get down and he wanted to connect. And I just I was this close to bawling, crying. Just such a lovely, warm man, nearly like sort of the lovely priest you'd meet there, just a really soothing when you're at, you know, a funeral and someone's died and you need someone really calming and peaceful and just that gives out this kindness or energy, something really calming about it. He had that. And there's so many, I didn't meet one dickhead, excuse my language, but you know, it just reinforced how wonderful a city this is in a country. And we're very lucky. We just have to look for those positives rather than get dragged into the negatives.
Yeah. I mean, that picture is going to remain in my mind anyway as one of the iconic moments of this whole COVID thing. It was really, it's hard not to look at it and be touched by it, to be honest with you. You know, but
it was a brilliant thing he did, Sergio. But you should know that Kevin Piggot is one of the leaders of mental well-being team, the William Grant's group, not just Ireland. So Kevin actually is part of the driving force behind that. And in our offices in Dublin and in Tullamore, Kevin reaches out to so many people and leads so many initiatives to make sure that people have every opportunity to help their mental well-being state. So he's you know, without putting a tooth in it, he's a brilliant guy for loads of reasons. But that particular one, his empathy, his great support for people who struggle, is well known in William Grant.
Well, I think you know, obviously when John says it, it's lovely to hear, but I think that comes across outside as well to the ordinary person not working directly with Kevin. So I think you ought to be really complimented on that and the other work you do, because you are a very approachable and a very human person. And one of the things I do love is your interest in poetry and readings and so forth. So I'm going to put you on the spot here, Kevin, and ask you to recite either a poem or a saying or a song that you would have come up with yourself, and and then we'll give John his limelight as well after this.
Okay.
Oh God, no. I'm not doing anything after this.
I see a few things in the comments. There's a bartenders FC, which is a great idea. I know a few of the lads are involved in that. That's a great idea for guys in hospitality to get out and play a bit of five-a-side. I know Will and a few of the lads are involved, so that's a great initiative. Previously, I was based most of the time in Tullamore, so I couldn't. So maybe I'll try and get down and show them how bad I am at football. Jack's question: do you speak during these events? It's completely up to the person. So the idea with the eye experiment is you sit down, you start in silence, and if someone wants to talk, needs to talk, laugh, cry, or you know, it's completely up to them. So I give them the opportunity to sit down for as long as they want. If they want to break it, if they feel uncomfortable, they're told to start. They can leave whenever they want. So they get as much or as little as they want. And it's just about reinforcing there's no agenda, there's no religion, it's just about sort of connection. Okay, so I'll give you a poem. Just was looking through your first edition. Hard to believe winter 2016 is on it. If someone asked me, I would have said, oh, it came out 2018. There's no way, you know. And people are still... I was arrogant enough to go, will he have enough to write about? Like, holy crap, yeah. So good. I worked in the Palace very briefly, and you have the pride of the Palace there. Good old Willie. So heart goes out to Willie, one of the best publicans there are out there, and having a tough time with the pub. But I wrote a little poem about Willie's bar at the Palace, if you'll indulge me. So, please. A chalice in the palace where light meets dark, enough to make any conversation spark. The pen and the pencil, memories ingrained just like a stencil. A gem in the cobblestone, points as creamy as ice cream cones. A temple of a bar, but not in Temple Bar. Fleet Street for certain, but certainly not a fleeting place, a warm space, a cultural embrace. This is my happy place. So cheers to Willie for that.
Yeah, it was Sláinte.
And to everyone in the bars who's having a tough time.
Well done, KP. Cheers.
And John, I know you've shared a toast, and every time it has been a different one. So perhaps you might give us one of your famous toasts there, just to bid us a good evening and to thank everybody for joining us, and to wish everybody well going forward.
If anyone has a glass, we'll raise it. But if you don't, pretend. Here's to cheating, stealing, fighting, and drinking. 4 very Irish traits. If you cheat, may you cheat death. If you steal, may you steal a heart. If you fight, may you fight your brother. And if you drink, may you drink with me. Cheers.
Sláinte.
Thanks for having us, Sergius.
Thank you very much, both of you, for being on.
Pleasure. Hopefully everybody doesn't pass you at this stage.
Yeah, look, it's been fantastic to have you both on the show. We don't get the opportunity to get you to get 2 people on the show from the one place very often. Best of luck with everything. Best of luck with the reopening and getting things back to normal. Stay safe, and it's been a real honor and a pleasure. And I think you've given the industry so much over the last while, and we look forward to hearing much more. So thank you very much, and stay safe. Take care now. Thank you.
Cheers, everyone.
Sláinte. Wow, that was I really enjoyed that chat with the 2 gentlemen, and they're very human people, and they're doing a fantastic job in Tullamore DEW, a brand that I think is very underrepresented in Ireland, but a huge success abroad. And yeah, so thanks very much for joining. We look forward to joining you again next week. We have Alex from Bushmills Distillery joining us next week, so that should be fun, and we'll be talking about the Sexton and other releases. So please join us the same time next week, 7:30. And in the meantime, everybody look after themselves and one another. And tomorrow morning, we'll be making an announcement about a competition we're running in conjunction with the Spirits Institute and Nick Ryan. So just watch out on our website and on our social media for a very nice competition we're running then. So until then, good night, stay safe, and see you next week. Bye. Sláinte.